With only 2 days to go before South Africans vote in the local government elections, we take a look at how organizations predict election results. Statisticians from the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research are gearing up to forecast using a world-class prediction model. The Council says this is to make the predictions more accurate. Joining me now is CSIR statistician Pravesh Debba. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Interesting model that you've been using throughout the previous elections, giving some insight on what these expectations could be as we take a look at local government elections 2021. What have you found?
I think firstly we need to understand that our model that the CSIR is doing with, and it's in partnership with the SABC, it's actually a mathematical model which is able to predict quite accurately what the final outcome would be for at least the top political parties. So let me just explain that, because it's quite important. At this moment, we only start running the model once the voting districts have been closed and some of the voting districts are declared. So we use the declared voting districts to then predict what the final outcome would be. So when as little as about 10% of the voting districts are declared, the CSIR is able to predict quite accurately what the final outcome would be. So we only start this, after the voting stations have been closed and some of the voting districts have been counted.
Let's take a look at the 2016 municipal elections and some of your findings and predictions then. You spoke about the ANC losing some control and sole control of certain metros like Johannesburg, and Tshwane. How did you manage to get to that accuracy when it comes to the final outcome?
Okay, that's actually quite a good question, because what the model does is that it looks at what we first do is we form clusters of voting districts, and that is using the previous election. When the voting districts are then declared, we then use that clusters to see how similar this voting district that has been declared is to the clusters. And then we project that to all other voting districts, having similar type of voting behavior. So when there are changes in voting behavior, that is carried through to changes in other voting districts as well, which are similar or dissimilar. So that is how the model is actually being used in order to then predict what is happening in other areas. And therefore, when there are changes in Gauteng, as an example, in 2016, we were quite accurate in predicting what were the changes. And I think also 2016, what was quite amazing was, for example, for eThekwini, the results was actually declared much later. So a lot of the results were held back, and it only declared more towards the afternoon, the day after. But even without having received any results for eThekwini, the CSIR was able to quite accurately predict what the final outcome would be for eThekwini.
You speak about changes in voting behavior, and as we take a look at the local government elections of 2021, we will note that there are more independent candidates, almost double what we saw in previous elections, and the sort of smaller parties gaining some ground, like Action SA and the Good Party. In conducting your comparative analysis, as you take a look at those elections and these elections, what are some of the perhaps telling trends that one can predict?
Yes. So even in the last national elections with the Good Party, the model was able to predict what the final outcome would be, especially for the Western Cape, for the Good Party. But I must say, we concentrate more on the top parties, so the bigger parties, as opposed to the smaller parties, because the model also, there is a certain amount of error. So the margin of error on the model is around 2%. And as long as we are within those bounds of 2%, we are quite satisfied with the predictions. So when it comes to the smaller parties, it becomes more challenging in order to do accurate predictions. So therefore, we concentrate more on the top 5 political parties. But this could be, one of the smaller parties, but in a particular area, it would have more support.
What are some of the interesting trends that you've observed? I mean, we, as Newzroom Afrika, have certainly been out on the ground listening to the voters, the voice of the people who are speaking about service delivery, water shortages, electricity being some of the main factors. When we take a look at that atmosphere in the build-up to the local government elections, what are some of these interesting trends that could perhaps make some sort of mark when it comes to what you're predicting?
Yes. Again, because the model is only going to be run from midnight on Monday. At this moment, we don't look at any of the trends and what is happening, but so the way in which we are preparing ourselves to be ready for Monday night is that we formed the various different clusters from the previous elections. So that is being done, and the program is being set up, and also so that it's able to read real-time data. But we can only start with the predictions and looking at trends and looking at the way things are starting to maybe change from the last elections to this elections. We can only start doing that from the early parts of Tuesday morning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, leaving us there with Pravesh Debba, statistician from the CSIR.